Hey everyone, I wanted to make this video just to show you a little bit of what I'm looking for if you choose to do this optional extra credit assignment for Lab 3.2, which is the digital darkroom section. Um, you may not always need to use Lightroom. Um, Lightroom is really effective for things that include raw photography. I'll explain a little bit about that. When you are shooting primarily with the DSLR, although phones are kind of faking it now, there are a couple of different file types that you can use to capture that photography. The one that we're probably all most familiar with would be a JPEG. And a JPEG has really great benefits for output. It's super client friendly. It can open on almost any, I mean, really any device. Um, and it can be uploaded straight to the web. There's lots and lots of benefits to JPEGs. But one of the downfalls of it from a professional's perspective is what you see is what you get. When it comes to editing a JPEG, you don't have anything else on either side of what's called the histogram. I'll show you that in a little bit. Basically, you can't really add a whole lot more brightness to the shadows. You can't really reduce the lightness and the highlights. Um, all you can really do is cook them up. So I'll get into that in a little bit, but I wanted to make this video to show you a little bit of what I'm expecting when it comes to this assignment. I'm going to share my screen. So right here, I've given you the images that I want you to edit. They are what is called raw files. Now, these raw files are not like JPEGs. They are absolutely massive. So those files are going to take a little bit to download, but raw files work a little bit differently, where although what you're seeing is very similar to a JPEG in its output, you have a lot more leeway on either side. You have information in the highlights and shadows that aren't being what's called clipped. So I've already downloaded those. Also, it's really, really important that you use Lightroom Classic, not Lightroom CC. Lightroom CC can do some things, but it's not going to be able to do all of these things. So I'm going to go ahead and open Lightroom Classic. Sorry, that's a photo of me in Yosemite. I'm going to create a new catalog. And it's really important that we name our files and we keep track of the catalogs that we're doing. Let me just come in here really quick. Got to open up my downloaded folder. That way we can use it. It's going to download as a zip file. You just have to double click on it to open it. And let me drag this over. You can see that there's about 10 images in here. These are just images that I've taken across the time. There's some photos in here from several different places, and I want you guys to edit them. So in my downloads folder, I'm going to go and I'm going to find that folder. And I'm just going to, oops, didn't want to do that. Hang on a sec. Let me go pull that out of my trash. If you ever do that, you can always put it back, problem solved. All right, there we go. New catalog. What I was trying to do there was I was trying to rename it. Where did it go? There it is. Rename. All right, it's being a little fussy today. I'll just come over here, copy that, paste it in my save as, and then hit create. And give it a second. You can't have more than one Lightroom catalog open at one time. The way that I usually do it is I will break my catalogs out by photo shoot. So if I have a particular photo shoot that I'm working on, I'll just create a new catalog for that shoot. Now we have to actually get our photos into Lightroom. And there's a couple of different ways that you can do this. Once again, if you can't show me 10 different ways to do the same thing in almost any Adobe product, you're probably not a professional yet. I'm just going to hit import down here. I'm going to select a source and other source. I have it in my downloads folder. And I'm just going to scroll down here to the digital darkroom and I'll hit choose because that's where my raw photos are. I'll hit import and voila, there they all are. So there's a couple of instructions I want you guys to follow. Those are all listed out in Canvas. So just make sure that you are paying pretty close attention to those. The first step is that I want you to adjust the exposure, contrast, highlight, shadows, whites, and blacks. What does any of that mean? Well, let's take a look at this image. As you can see, it's a little dark, right? But what we have up here is something called a histogram. This histogram, as I was mentioning, this shows where the light falls within your image. And we can see that we're on the left, you have the darker end of the spectrum. On the right, you have the brighter end of the spectrum. We kind of want to balance this out. And a really good image should ideally have this histogram extended across the entire box here. That's how you know that you have really good shadows, you have really good highlights, all of that good stuff. Now, from there, we also want to make sure that we're not clipping the shadows or the highlights. So let me show you really quick. We'll go to the Develop tab, and I'm just going to increase the exposure here. All right, see how that's sliding up a little bit, and now we kind of have it extending from the shadows over here to the highlights over here. And right now, nothing is in these little deltas up here. But if I go too far, there we go. See how now this delta turned blue, or even if I go a little bit further, now it's just completely white. That means you're clipping the highlights. You don't want to do that. You want to pull that down so that really there's nothing in the highlights, and hopefully you are balancing out that histogram. There's a couple of other controls that we can use to work with this. A lot of photographers are going to tell you that you want to have some sort of pure black and some sort of pure white. So once we get this histogram balanced, the next thing that I usually like to do is I like to come down to my contrast slider. And everyone has a slightly different workflow. That's okay. You can find a workflow that works for you. But notice that when I'm moving this contrast slider, look at what the histogram's doing. It's spreading out, right? It's actually saying, hey, let's take the highlights and the shadows and just move them a little bit further apart. That's what contrast is. It's saying, hey, I want brighter whites and I want darker blacks. So here we don't really need a whole lot of contrast, at least not right now, because we can actually control this individually. If I want darker blacks, I can come down here and I can make my blacks darker. But again, look, we're starting to clip those blacks a little bit. And if you hover over it, you can actually see where those blacks are. So let me pull this back a little bit. I want to try to keep that histogram fully within the box. Okay, I don't want to clip anything, not yet. Then from the whites, we can do the same thing. And here we've got a lot of leeway that we can work with. So I'm going to put it right about there, something like that. Okay. So already, based on what we've done here, we've already adjusted the exposure. I reset the contrast, so we haven't really adjusted the contrast much, but we may not need to for this image. We've adjusted the highlights, we've adjusted the shadows. Well, better yet, we've adjusted the blacks and the whites a little bit. Now we can come in here and we can bump up these shadows. But notice what's happening. Where we're getting a little bit more detail in the shadows down here, and this histogram is kind of bumping up in the middle here. It's actually, we're moving the blacks as well, right? So these are all interconnected in some way. So I might come down here and I might put my blacks back. Also, this area here in the image is starting to look a little bit grainy, right? So I might actually want to put some of those shadows back. But as I move that shadow back a little bit, we are now clipping the shadows or the blacks again. So I might come in here, raise those blacks ever so slightly. And then we can do the same thing with the highlights, right? Come in here. Maybe I actually want less highlight, right? Maybe I want a little bit more. That's okay too. I'm going to push my highlights up a little bit. And then I'm actually going to pull my whites down a little. There we go. So already from where we were at to where we are now, we're looking quite a bit better, right? Ideally, in a perfect world, this photo would have been nicely exposed in camera. Sometimes that doesn't happen. Sometimes we have to come in and we have to make these adjustments. You are not going to get this amount of leeway out of a JPEG. If this image were just strictly a JPEG, in fact, why don't I show you? Let's do this one. I'm going to bring in a JPEG here. Yeah. Not going to worry about naming it right now. Here's that other way to import a photo. You can just go to File, Import Photos, select Source, other source, and I'll just go in there. Perfect. So now, if you do import twice, you might want to come back up here to All Photographs. That way you can see them all. So now I have two of the same images right next to each other. One is a JPEG, one is a RAW photo. This one's the RAW photo. So let me, I'm actually going to select both. That way the adjustments that I make apply to both images. Let me do that. Perfect. There we go. All right. So I'm just going to bump up the exposure, just like I did on the last one. Now, notice something here. We're pretty high on that exposure, but my blacks are still clipped, right? This is normal. This just means that the photo was underexposed to begin with, and we might not be able to recover some of that information. But let me push up that exposure. Already, just by doing that, look at the difference between a JPEG and a RAW. Particularly pay attention to like the shadows right here. You're getting a little bit less out of it. There's more detail here than there is here. Now, that gets even more apparent when you go to do something like this. This here, these are your white balance controls. If you're shooting in RAW, you have the ability to adjust the white balance later. That's why I actually didn't go over white balance too much within class in lab 3.1. But in a RAW photo, let's say that I wanted this image to be a little bit warmer. I can do that here. Whereas if I'm looking at the JPEG, let me push it a little further. We're starting to get some funky things happening here, right? So now the JPEG and the RAW photo are totally different. You have more data within a RAW photo to edit than you do within a JPEG. So essentially what's happening is this histogram in a JPEG is just getting chopped off completely. Whereas in a RAW photo, you have some leeway on either side of that histogram to pull in information. You also have the ability, watch this, to adjust the tone later. So it's a very slight difference. This can get dramatically different depending on the time you took the photo, the lighting conditions, all of it. So just be mindful of that. There we go. So let's come back here for a minute. We've already adjusted the exposure. I am going to add a little bit of contrast in here because I think that we can work with that. And something that I'm noticing, we are a little soft on the focus. This is a really old photo. Let's see. Yeah, I was taken back in 2017. This was when I was a college student. So that said, we're a little soft there. It's also a little dark, okay? I'm just gonna bring the blacks up a little bit, bring the shadows up a little bit. All that looks great. The exposure is within the histogram. That's what I wanna see. And then we have some pretty good contrast. There's no clipped highlights. There's no clipped shadows. So we're good on that. You can also choose if you would like to crop the image. So I can just go to my crop tool here. Maybe I want to use the rule of thirds. I can do that. So now she's aligned on the rule of thirds there. That would be a really nice composition. That looks a little bit better, right? She has a more prominent pose within the image now. She's taking up a little bit more of the frame. That looks great. You can also, just as I was showing you guys earlier, color correct a little bit. I might want this image to be a little bit warmer, just so that the skin tones look really nice and these rocks look a little bit better. You can also adjust things like clarity and we've got a lot of haze in here, right? So I might come in here and dehaze a little bit. Or I might, sorry, it actually goes the other way. This going down is not to dehaze, going up is to dehaze for whatever reason. That always gets backwards in my head. But notice something when you're doing that. As you're adjusting that, you're actually adjusting the histogram as well. And as you add more dehaze, you're actually adding more contrast as well. So that gets a little touchy sometimes. I'm going to go ahead and leave that alone here. And if you ever want to reset a slider, you can usually just double click on it. I don't know why it's not working for this one for whatever reason. Oh, I see. I was attached to it. There we go. You can double click and it'll reset. So notice that we've got a little bit of a problem with our histogram here. Let's bump up our blacks a little bit and reduce our whites slightly. There we go. So now we're not clipping anymore. We're in a little bit better shape. So everything that you adjust here is going to change your histogram. Okay. Every single thing. Maybe I'll increase my saturation a little bit, but decrease my vibrance just a little. Actually, let's do that the opposite way. Let's increase our vibrance, decrease our saturation a little. There we go. You can also do a little bit of color grading. You can come in here and say, I want my shadows to be a little bit more, this actually looks really awful. Maybe I want my shadows to be a little bit more orange. I can do that. Reduce the saturation just a little bit. And then maybe I want, actually, those were my midtones. I apologize. So shadow, that explains why it looked like crap. Let's do my shadows as a little bit more teal. There we go. And then let's do my highlights as a little bit more orange. Now it looks like a Transformers movie, right? You can also come down here. This is something that I do on every image. Remove chromatic aberration and enable profile corrections. You can kind of see that the lens distortion moved a little bit on that when we selected enable profile corrections. That's what it's supposed to do. Lenses have a natural, what is called vignetting, where it's a little bit dark around the edges. You can see that. So enabling profile corrections removes that, and it also removes any distortion that the lens might have. And then removing chromatic aberration. Let's see if we have any in here. Yeah, this one doesn't have a whole lot of chromab. Maybe a little right there. Yeah, not so much. This one probably does have some. Yeah, not so much. Yeah, a lot of these images don't really have a whole lot of chromatic aberration. Maybe in there a little bit. Let's see what happens on this one. Okay, this is a good one. This is a very, very, very small detail. But chromatic aberration, there's a little bit of a magenta edge to this acrylic frame that's here. When you click on remove chromatic aberration, you can very slightly see that that magenta goes away. The reason that this is important is that in a lot of digital cameras now, you have what's called an aliasing filter. Some of those cameras have the anti-aliasing filter removed. And some of those cameras where they're removed, you get that chromatic aberration. And it's really just an artifact of digital cameras these days. So it's nice to go in and remove that. I would bet we have quite a bit of chromatic aberration in this one, actually. Let's see if I can find it. Yep, so you can kind of see a little bit of it. Here it's coming in as a little bit more gray around the tree branches. When you click on that, you can see it go away. Um, it's a very small detail, but it's a huge thing that makes your photos look so much better. And you get a little bit more sharpness out of them. You can also do that. You can adjust your sharpness a little bit. Be very careful because if you overcook this and you zoom in, see how it starts looking pixelated? You don't want that. So be very mindful about how you sharpen, okay? You don't want what's called haloing. Right there, we're kind of getting a little bit of a halo around the model here. So we can also adjust this until it looks just about right. You don't want to go too far. I see a lot of photos out there where the sharpening is just cooking the whole image. We don't want to do that. So just be mindful about how you sharpen. I encourage you, go watch a couple of videos on sharpening. I think some other people explain it much better than I do. But just really be mindful about how far you are pushing the sharpening. Sharpening and clarity are two totally different things. Notice there that the clarity, what did it do? It mostly just adjusted the contrast. So be careful there. You probably don't need as much clarity as you think you do. Clarity, honestly, I think I rarely use it. I'm mostly in the sharpen region. All right, I think that's most of it. Let's say that I had applied those adjustments to all of my images. I can select all of them by just doing Command A or Control A if you're on a PC. I can then go to File, Export, and there is this, well, before I do that, let me show you guys how to update metadata. In order to do that, you would need to go to the Library tab. And over here, mine might look a little bit different than yours. I would just recommend go to this dropdown and select EXIF and IPTC metadata. You want both of those for this assignment because you need to update a few things. You need to update the creator name to my name because I actually took these photos. So you could just copy that out of Canvas and scroll through here. Down here, here's the creator name. Okay, so you can just paste my name in there. If you have all of them selected, it should update that information on all of them. But if you only have one selected, let me update the job title. If I only have one selected and I go to the next, it's not going to update it. So just make sure that you have them all selected. That way, when you apply the metadata, it works. You can update the email address to my email address, not address, email. There we go. Get rid of that. And then the session number, I want to show you guys this. So when you go into Canvas, the session number is different for every class. So if a future class is watching this, your session number is going to be different than the one that I put in here. Within my ASU, this would be your session number right here. Okay, so even within this class, the session numbers are going to be different. So then we can go back and I want you guys to put the session number into the job number section, which should be down here. Might be missing it. Sec. There it is, job identifier. You can drop that in there, and that's your session number. Then what you can do is you can go to File, Export. Make sure to select all your images first, actually. File, Export. And there's actually a really cool trick that you can do to rename all of your images using the metadata within your image. Metadata is super important. It is, if you are working in a massive server with a bunch of people, that is how you can very quickly type in and find what it is that you need, okay? So there is a very specific file structure that I want you guys to use. I want you to use the custom name sequence. So in here, first set up where you want it to save, right? So I'll just save it in my folder here. I'll go to new folder and we'll say export. There we go. And you are going to save, go ahead and hit choose. You are going to save your images as a JPEG. So that's perfect. There are other options in here. You can save it as PSD. You can save it as a AVIF. I've never used that. You can do PNG, all of that good stuff. DNG is just saving it as another raw image. So no one's actually going to be able to open that unless they have Photoshop or Lightroom. I want to come up here, make sure this rename to is checked. And I'm going to actually do custom name, okay? Actually, let me double check something. Yeah, custom name. Down here, I'll do GIT 540 underscore 2025 or whatever year it is that you are in the class, underscore fall, or whatever semester you are in the class, lab 3.2, underscore your name. Okay, that's it. That's all you need. Once you have that, you can then go to export. And what it's going to do is it's going to create these image variants in that export folder. And that's it. Yours is only going to have 10, not 11. All right. So that's it. Another thing that you can do if you wanted to is you can actually use the metadata. So once I have that custom name put in there, let me cut that. I can do custom name. Let me just edit. Custom text. And then let's do underscore. We'll say session name, which we set up as our job number. Where is it? State. Down here in the metadata section, I can do job identifier. I could also do, let's do original number suffix. So that's the number that the original image had. We'll do done. Now, I also want to show you this because this is important. You can check resize to fit. And I've given you guys some instructions to go and set the long edge to 1080 pixels. There we go. You can leave the resolution at 300. That's the standard for printing images. You don't necessarily need to have your sharpen 4 checked. Then you can hit export. And now you're going to see that the image names are a little different. Here it's just untitled because I didn't put anything in the custom name section. But I wanted you guys to see that you could add the original file name and then create variants of that. So whatever works for you guys, whatever's listed in Canvas, follow that. But I wanted to show you guys a couple of different options. Hopefully that's helpful. If you guys have any questions, use each other, reach out to each other in the general channel in Slack. This is an extra credit assignment, so I don't want you to feel like you need to do it. But if you would like a little bit of extra information on using Lightroom, this is a great way to get that practice in. So hopefully you enjoy. Let me know if you have any questions. Reach out to your peers as well.